Chapter 12. Lady Sylvina Baratheon. It had been news that they had known was coming, shortly after returning to Winterfell after doing treaties with Yara and the execution of Arlena, the news that Sylvina Baratheon had taken a turn for the worse. Her maester did not think she had much longer to live, her health rapidly declining, and she had taken to her bed. She had refused to get it up and had called for her confessor to give her the last rites. The halls of Becton were already dressed in mourning, and her ladies wept for their mistress. No one could have expected that she would decline so quickly that they had not seen it coming. Lady Syria Caswell had traveled from her marital home. She had been by her mother's side since the news had reached her. She couldn't believe that she was about to become an orphan. It meant that she was the last of her family. Her father and older brother had already died, and she had kept a distance from her niece and nephews because she hadn't coped very well with the news that she would never have children of her own. Syria watched as her mother lay in her bed. Her breathing labored as she slept, and she felt tears burn her eyes as she pondered everything that she had missed. Her husband had always been loving and tender. He had understood her grief at them, never having children, and now he helped her run her mother's lands that would soon be her. No. The doors to the chamber opened, and Syria pursed her lips as she saw Sanera enter the room. The younger woman moved to greet her aunt, who dropped into a stiff curtsy. "Your Grace," Syria murmured. Her husband had been quick to declare his loyalty for House Stark when Robb had been made king. He had expressed his excitement knowing that, as aunt and uncle to the new queen, that they would benefit from that in some way. Dovin had been granted some royal warrants in recent months. His house were known for their horses, and they now provided horses to House Stark. Dovin had even gifted some ponies to the young princes for them to learn to ride. He was pleased that his gifts were warmly welcomed and hoped to be invited to court soon. That was Syria's worst nightmare. She had not been close with her niece or her nephews, and serving in Sanera's court at her behest was not something that she wanted. Syria wasn't too proud for that. "Sanera," Sylvina called, reaching out, a smile upon her face as she looked at her only granddaughter, who was quick to move to her side. Syria couldn't hide the look of jealousy on her face. To her, it was another sign of Roland's family being favored over her. It sucked to see her mother find everything that she was looking for in her granddaughter rather than her own daughter, and to watch Sylvina share their heritage with Sanera. "Grandmother," Sanera whispered. She sat down on the bed beside her grandmother, who was propped up by pillows. It was strange to see the once strong Sylvina in such a way. It seemed like not too long ago that Sanera had been learning of her heritage from her grandmother, who had been eager to see their heritage passed on while she had the chance. "Daughter BG. Perhaps I should fetch the maester," Sanera encouraged. She didn't like to see her grandmother suffer like this. She felt like she still had so much to learn, and she didn't feel ready to do so alone. Her grandmother had always been so kind and caring, a stark contrast to the woman that her mother had been. The execution of Arlena was still fresh in Sanera's mind. There's nothing for a maester to see, and thank gods, nothing that some fool with a knife could think to cut out, Sylvina informed. She looked at Sanera, knowing that there was nothing for her now. The last thing that she wanted was to be poked and prodded by some foolish man in her last days. She had lived a good life, and she knew that her time was coming. My heart, it's beating strangely. I feel it skip a beat and then go slow. It won't beat strongly again, Sanera, Sylvina explained. Her breathing labored as she looked past Sanera to Syria, who watched them with a cold look on her face. It was hard to explain, hard to express what was going on in her mind. She had so much that she had to share. Now her time was short, and she doubted she would last more than a couple of days. "Are you in any pain?" Sanera asked. She moved to fix the covers on her grandmother, not wishing to upset her further than necessary. Her grandmother sounded so certain of her fate that it left no room for any argument. Syria moved away from the scene before her, moving to speak with the ladies that had served her mother. Soon, they would be her household, and there would be changes to Becton that would have to make. "No, there's no pain for me except in knowing yours," Sylvina said quietly so that her words could not be overheard. She didn't broadcast her scenes any more than Sanera did. Sylvina reached for Sanera's arm. She knew that she would not get to see the world that Sanera would usher in. She would not get to comfort her when things looked bad, nor celebrate her wins. "You will have another boy. Of that I am sure. Not this one nor the next, and what a boy he will be. I'm sure of that too," Sylvina mused, resting her hand on Sanera's bump. She was most certain that the child that Sanira was carrying would be a daughter, as would the next child that Sanira and Rob would have, two beautiful daughters that would take after their mother, that Sylvina was sure. Then get well and stay with me. You've been with me through everything, everything. I would not be here without you. None of us would be here without you, Sanira pleaded, tears in her eyes, knowing that she could not do this without her. They would have lost at the twins to House Frey if it hadn't been for Sylvina. It had been Sylvina's intervention. That had seen the alliance begin with her speaking to her nephew to get him to come to the Stark's aid at the twins. And yet here you are, and through you and your children I will have founded a line of kings. And queens too, I think, Sylvina mused with a tired smile. Her work was done, and Sanira was stronger than she thought. The future was clear to her. The line would continue into the future, and they would be stronger than ever if everything that she saw came to pass. Style. I'm not ready, Sanira murmured. She needed her guidance and support. She wasn't ready to say her goodbyes, and she wished that there was something that she could do to make her grandmother better. Sylvina patted Sanira's hand. No one was ever ready to say goodbye, but it would not be goodbye forever, and they would see each other again. It is my will and intention that my lands and titles should be inherited by Prince Osric, Sylvina declared. She ignored the look of outrage from her daughter at the news that Becton would be inherited by Sanira's second son, Dadowa. Her rightful inheritance ripped from under her to be given to the princeling that was only just a year old now. It would be many years before he was old enough to rule the lands in his own right. The room was filled with Sylvina's family. She had wanted to be surrounded by her nearest and dearest in her final moments. She was gray and looked ill against the whiteness of eye. Her pillows. Arthur and Elaine had arrived from Airedale with their two sons, Corin and Destin II, while Destin had come with the Baratheons who had traveled to pay their respects to Sylvina, as Stannis was her last remaining nephew. Syria and her husband lingered away from the others, keeping their distance as Sylvina's ladies wept openly for their mistress. Looking around the room, Sylvina couldn't help but smile at how blessed she was, and she knew without a doubt that all would be well. The alliance was strong and would survive past her death. The North and South would need each other. The Dragon Queen was coming, and they needed to be prepared. The long night was upon them, and they would need the strength to survive. Sylvina wheezed as she leaned back in her bed. She was ready to be reunited with Ronard and Roland. She was eager to see her parents and brother again after so very long one. In the corner of the room, Sylvina could see her mother, Princess Rhaelle Targaryen, waiting for her. A proud smile on her face as she stared at her only daughter. Sylvina suddenly gasped, her hand latching on to Sanira's, and a look of panic filled her face as the goddess blessed Sylvina Baratheon with one final vision. Gold and white, the final words passing Sylvina's lips as a breath before she slipped away, her eyes staring on seeing it Sanira, who bowed her head unaware of how important to Sylvina Baratheon's words would be.